Hi there once again. Great to have you back here. If you're watching us on WTOL 11 Plus, a special welcome to you. And if you're listening to our podcast, we appreciate the follow. Coming up in just a few minutes, the Willows, Fifi's, Ricardo's, Dyer's. No, it's not a list of addresses for your Christmas cards. They're all former restaurants that have a special place in Toledo history, and they're all featured in a new book. We'll dive into that with the author here in just a moment. But first, he came closer than anyone had before. Derek Merrin came within a few thousand votes of defeating Marcy Kaptur for the U.S. House 9th District seat, a seat that she has held since 1983. But now, as they say, he is throwing his hat back in the ring. Derek Merrin joining us once again here on Leading Edge. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Jeff, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Big announcement earlier this week. Talk a little bit about throwing your hat back in the ring.
Well, Jeff, I want to finish the mission. We came closer than anyone has to defeating Marcy Kaptur. And I love America. I love Northwest Ohio. And it's time that we have the bold conservative leadership our region needs and some fresh energy. And I believe I'm the leader to do that.
We were talking basketball before we started today. I want to use a sports reference. And they talk about moral victories all the time when you lose. Was there a moral victory in any of last November for you?
Yes. I mean,
because I don't think there are moral victories in politics. It's either you win or you don't. Right?
Well, listen, the Democrats spent almost $15 million trying to defeat us, and they put an enormous amount of effort into it because they needed to. And we gave the voters a choice.
Yeah.
The majority of people, Jeff, rejected Marcy Kaptur. She didn't get 51% of the vote. She didn't even get 49% of the vote. The majority of the voters said, we're fed up and tired of Marcy Kaptur. We want someone new. But we had a third-person race, and we came up less than 1% short.
I want to talk about Tom Pruss just a minute. I haven't had a chance to talk to you. I've been texting you again and again, and I appreciate you being here. But Tom was on with us in January. I want to cue up that tape, roll the soundbite from Tom Pruss in January. Did you ruin the race in November?
No. I added more, a divergent voice to the bad campaigning that both sides were out there pushing.
I've been waiting for months to get a reaction from you to what he just said right there. Fair? Fair assessment?
Well, he got 4.1% of the vote. It's a free country. He was more than.
But 15,000 votes that swayed it.
Yeah, well, it's a protest vote.
Yeah.
And people are frustrated with both parties. I'm frustrated with both parties. But I choose to be a Republican because that's the party that mostly closely aligns my values. Undoubtedly the Libertarian candidate hurt us in the race.
Yeah.
You can see that by looking at how they voted when there was only a Republican or Democrat on the ballot. And those voters went about 75% for the Republican candidate. They also went about 75 to 80% for Donald Trump. So, the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi's group, Jeffries, their super PAC supported the Libertarian candidate with over $1 million trying to deceive Republican voters, saying, awful things about me, and then saying, the Libertarian was a Trump candidate, which he's not. So they manipulated people to try to, get what they wanted, and that was to reelect Marcy Kaptur.
You said I'm not happy with either party. What is it about your current party that you you don't see eye to eye with?
Well, I believe we need to be more fiscally responsible. We've got to balance the budget. We got to institute and go back to federalism. I'm a small government guy, and our founding fathers never wanted this huge bureaucracy in federal government. So a lot of these programs need to be pushed down to the state's level. And I support the Republicans' efforts to unleash energy, to lower taxes, to expand school choice, to protect our country, and deport all these illegal immigrants that we have here. I mean, this is, Trump won the day on the election day, but we still got 20 million people here, many with violent criminal histories that need to be deported. And that's one of the reasons, Jeff, I want to go to Congress. I want to support the president's agenda and help, bring the golden age to fruition for all of us.
Bring me back down to, I guess, the brass tacks of politics and why you got clear of it. I consider it a dirty business sometimes. It's mean-spirited. Why jump back in? What is it about the draw?
I don't want to leave the battlefield until we win. And to be honest with you, Jeff, politics is tough. I watched my good family name be slandered and defamed for over 100 days on the TV, radio, and direct mail and digital. But I love my country. And we have young men and women that are fighting and giving their lives to protect our country, the least I can do is run for public office, and I can resist the bad TV ads. But I love Northwest Ohio. We deserve better, Jeff. We deserve better. Your viewers know that Toledo in Northwest Ohio has not reached its full potential. And it's because one of the main reasons is we don't have a federal congressperson that believes like we do. I mean,
should there be term limits?
Yes.
And to what degree?
Well, I mean, let's start with something.
Yeah.
I mean, anything's better than what we have right now. I mean, I could.
I mean, I've heard things thrown out there. You should have maybe two or three for senators and have two for representatives.
I think 12 years is certainly reasonable. But I signed a pledge for term limits that I'll support and co-sponsor a bill to instill term limits. And I believe that. Listen, we've got to get back to people that want to actually serve our country. Yeah. Marcy Kaptur's been in office for 42 years. Jeff, it's about her. It's about her, okay? That's what it's about. And unfortunately, she's really been a backbencher in Congress. She's never been given a chairmanship. Her own party doesn't trust her to give her enough of a chairmanship. I mean, how embarrassing is that? I mean, you go there, I mean, if you're going to go to Washington for that long, you might as well be someone and become one of the most powerful person. But she can't even get along with her own party, let alone.
Did you guys cross paths on the campaign trail last fall?
No, because no, not really. I mean, she wouldn't publicize her schedule because she was hiding from folks. No one could even really find out where she was. Everything wanted to be staged because she doesn't want to be confronted with her record.
I want to focus on a couple other things. We're going to take our first break, but I want to focus on a couple other things when we come back. One of those, just weeks before the actual election, you had a big moment at Toledo Express Airport that I want to talk about when we return. Also want to talk about, I had Vivek Ramaswamy sitting exactly where you're sitting just a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him about changing the mentality of going from a national focus to a centralized Ohio focus. You would do just the opposite. I want to talk about that. Stay with us. We'll be back on Leading Edge right after this. Welcome back here on Leading Edge. Once again, Derek Merrin joining us here in our first couple of segments. You are back into the ring as far as running for the 9th district seat, taking on Marcy Kaptur once again. I said before we went to break, I wanted to bring back up a moment from just before the November election. You're out at Toledo Express Airport. You are flanked by a list of who's who in D.C. How does that come together? How does that happen? I also want to touch on what you proposed at the time, because a week later, Marcy Kaptur came forward, said $1 million going out to Eugene F. Cran's Toledo Express Airport, but you were pushing for commercial traffic out there. Has that fallen silent since? Are you still moving for that?
Well, I'm absolutely moving for that. I brought some of the most powerful and influential members of Congress to Toledo Express Airport. I told them this is one of the things that we have to help Toledo with. We have to have a functional airport with commercial traffic, not just cargo. Everyone doesn't need to be driving up to Detroit. We lost our connection to Chicago.
But did that speak? Do you think it struck a nerve? With the powers that be, did you hear from the Port Authority after you did that?
Not directly, but it's just highlighting an area that has been neglected. Marcy Kaptur, she's supposed to be this powerful person. Jeff, you and I know she's not, but it just proves that she hasn't been able to help. I mean, she doesn't care about the deficit at all. But she could get millions and millions of dollars for that airport. She's all types of things they could do to help, bolster that airport and hold them accountable and get some commercial airliners in here. And it's not even on her radar screen. I mean, she helped get the money, after we're talking about it and putting pressure on it and highlighting it's a problem.
When you get Scalise, you get Latta standing behind you. I mean, does that, as soon as they leave town, is it forgotten? Is it in the rear view? Has there been any talk that in D.C. about Toledo Express since?
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to win and to move on the issue.
I just didn't know if you were pressing for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. You talked about we just had a moral victory. We helped the Toledo Express get that money because now it lights a fire under Kaptur that she has to not look so bad, and that now she's going to try to help more. She's going to, get up off the chair and try to do something. Yeah. But that's because we're putting pressure on her. And well, listen, we need help with the ports. We need building infrastructure with our ports. I mean, we're a regional transportation hub. We need to lean into that. We need more jobs in Northwest Ohio. We need higher paying jobs in Northwest Ohio. We need to increase the standard of living. Yeah. And we just can't be a flyover state. We need, Toledo is important. Northwest Ohio is important. This is our home, and this is why I'm running, Jeff. I'm willing to fight for it.
You were one of the youngest mayors to ever step foot into a mayoral office in the U.S. at the time. You've been in politics a long time. How do you shift your focus going from just centrally focused here to the state of Ohio and then on a national scale?
I think I've gotten the experience that's necessary. I served 6 years in local government. I've served 8 years at the state legislature. I've been in the private sector. I'm a real estate investor. I've helped create jobs. And that experience is necessary to go to Washington, D.C. You got to have experience building relationships, knowing policy. I changed over 20 laws in the state legislature. Really, I was involved in a lot more with that. A lot of those same things I can take to the federal government and know the process and look for practical ways to make a difference in people's lives. At the same time, focusing on the major issues of, securing the border, lowering the national debt, unleashing our energy. There's major issues that our country needs to address.
Talk to me a little bit about the field as it's building right now. Obviously, you've got competition on the Republican side of things. Josh Williams, Aaliyah Nadeem, Wayne Kinzel also jumping in.
Yeah.
Do you know the three of them? Your feelings, if any?
I don't know Kinzel at all. I believe we're in a strong position to win the nomination again. I don't take it for granted. I'm going to have to earn these votes. I jumped in the primary the last time. I had like 60 days and was able to pull it off because I think people know my record. They know I'm a true conservative. I am the most conservative candidate in this race, and I have a record to prove it. And at the appropriate time, we'll roll that out. I'm also, Jeff, I've been vetted, okay? You saw what the Democrats, tried to say about me. They really didn't have anything. I mean, they just really tried to lie about my voting record. But being vetted is very important, and people knowing what they're getting. And I believe I'm the strongest candidate to go up against Marcy Kaptur again.
What do you say to those who waffle back and forth? They call themselves independent. They're not strong Democrat. They're not strong Republican. How do you answer their call for being their representative?
Jeff, whether I talk to Republican, Democrat, or Independent, I talk about the same issues. Okay, I'm not two-faced and go back and forth. I want a secure border. That's not a partisan issue. It shouldn't be. I want fiscal responsibility. I want more money in your pockets, everyone's pockets. I want taxes lowered. I want the budget balanced. I want to stop devaluation of the U.S. dollar. I want energy production to increase. I want energy prices to go down as a result. And I want federalism. I want to get the power of the government from the federal government back to the states, okay? The government is so big, it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats in charge, it's still the same size. So, we need massive reform. I've challenged my own party, okay? I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a conservative before I'm a Republican.
What's your relationship with Bernie Moreno, if any, or John Husted?
I have a good relationship with both, and I was actually just speaking with Bernie Moreno the other day. I think he's doing a great job. Husted's a welcome addition to the Senate, and I'm confident he's going to do a good job. And Ohio is carrying the conservative movement right now and helping to push through President Trump's agenda.
Is Northwest Ohio in a good place? Got 30 seconds.
It could be better. It could be better, Jeff. We all know it could be better. I mean, you look at how the Democrats mismanaged the city of Toledo with government services. I mean, they can barely get the snow off.
Before I let you go, redistricting, if it does happen in the fall, how does that impact the race going forward?
It could significantly impact the race. I'm confident the Ohio Legislature and the Redistricting Commission is going to put together a good, solid map that makes sense. But whether they change it or not, we're going to win this. We're going to win this race. Marcy Kaptur serving her last term. It's time for new leadership. It's time for change. We've got to get some energy into our community, and I believe I'm the leader to do it.
Derek Merrin, once again, running for the 9th congressional seat. Good to see you again. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good luck going forward. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. I grew up in Toledo, and I can tell you, heck, I'm sure many of you know watching and listening to this. You already know this, but back in the 70s and the 80s, there were so many great restaurants and diners in the Glass City, but maybe more than that. There were great families and histories to go along with it. And I'm sure that's a big part of the reason that Toledo historian Ted Long wrote his latest book, Table for None, Lost Eateries of Toledo. Ted, we were looking at video of Dyers right there, and we went back into the annals and found some old video of stuff. As I went through this book, there were so many things that I was like, we got to find video of this, find video of that, find video of this. Talk to us a little bit about the labor of love going into this.
Well, it started actually when I was finishing up my last book, the Toledo Papers, and it was based on letters and ephemera to do with Toledo, and I was working with a collector.
Okay.
And Mark Snyder, he reminded me several times, he said, I have this incredible menu collection. So we sat down and started to look through it, and I said, this is going to be the next book.
Now, where does he get something like that? He just collects it over the years?
He's amazing. It's collects it over the years, but he finds all kinds of estate sales, eBay, you know, wherever it is.
Yeah.
And he just has a good eye.
Yeah.
And so it's not just menus, it's swizzle sticks, napkins, matchbooks,
Right.
ashtrays, you know, you name it.
I opened up, I was talking a little bit about some of the names from our history, the Willows, Ricardos, Fifis. Ricardos, I remember specifically being in the basement of the OI building, the now Fifth Third Bank building. But that elegance, was that something you touched on? Because I remember that as a kid growing up. There were these just, I don't want to call them high roller spots, but at the time they were exquisite.
Yeah, and you know, what's interesting is that Ricardo's is part of the Scaff family legacy of restaurants, all of which were very high class. They started off with the Willows.
On Monroe Street.
On Monroe Street.
Yeah.
Did a number of redecorations where they brought in, high-end decorators and, went all out. Then they opened Charcoal House.
Let me stop you there because let's dive into this a little bit.
Sure.
When you say they were bringing in decorators, just for our audience, and maybe some of our audience is younger, but you're saying they're changing tables, they're changing what? Go through it.
The entire style of the restaurant.
Yeah.
They would change the motif, they would change the color pattern, and it was all to keep up with what was going on in the culture at the time. I spent a lot of time reading old Toledo blade pieces from Mary Alice Powell. And she, I think, really enjoyed covering that aspect of the decorations and just what fine dining meant. It's good food, but it's also just the ambiance of what these restaurants were.
We also had there was a culinary collection that we also have video of. We'll show you that at home, where a number of the chefs from the area, they got together, and you're looking at, this is back in the 80s once again. But you touch on the culinary experience, and for years, Toledo was talked about as being a test market for a lot of different mom and pop and also chains to come into Toledo. Because it was such a melting pot. But fine dining was also something to be had here.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said,
Berman Supper Club out in Northwood, you mentioned.
Yeah, very, very high class, just exquisite menu, and just always first class.
Yeah. Soup and Such. Over the corner of Douglas and Sylvania for so many years. It's now a Mexican restaurant, but I remember as a kid the water wheel, which was this, it was stacked with ham, shredded lettuce, had a special sauce seasoning on it. Remember that so fondly. Some of the other places that stood out for you. Oaken Bucket, you guys dive into that quite a bit.
Well, it was hard
the
not to.
Nicolaitis family.
Nicolaitis family.
Yeah.
We moved here from Chicago in the late 80s, and the first thing we were asking people were, where can we get some really good ribs? And everyone kept saying Oaken Bucket, and boy, we found it, and we never stopped going there. That was the specialty for us there.
You dive into something in this book when you talk specifically about the Oaken Bucket, and you said there was no fanfare, there was no great hurrah going away. It was just they were open on a Tuesday, they were closed on a Wednesday, or something to that effect.
And I think, we talk about some of the interviews that were done at that time.
Touch on the Hollywood aspect of Oaken Bucket and the fame that went through those doors.
Well, the owner actually went out to Hollywood to make his fame in acting and came home and decided to open a restaurant that celebrated Hollywood and acting. And then over the years, celebrities would come to town and they would end up at the Oaken Bucket.
For those who don't know, Oaken Bucket was located on Reynolds Road, just south of Central Avenue, where there used to be a fantastic bowling alley, but then right around that curve where there's now ProMedica, you had the Oaken Bucket.
And they had some sandwiches named after Hollywood folks. I mean, it was a fun place.
The Bob Hope?
The Don Rickles?
Don Rickles was one that you touched on.
Yeah.
As you look back on this moment in time, I mean, have we lost that in Toledo?
I hope not.
Because you went all the way back to the 1800s with some of these spots.
You talked about how we were a big test market, and it's still a big test market. The chains love Toledo. That's why we have so many of them. But over time, they've kind of pushed out the mom and pop or locally owned restaurants. So I think we can hang on to it as long as we all patronize these local restaurants. We need to support them.
I talked about it being a melting pot, and you and I talked off camera about the cultural heritage that exists in so many of these places, the Lebanese influence that we have throughout Toledo in our restaurants, the Scaff family you mentioned.
Yes.
I mentioned the Hajar family with Beirut and, of course, Poco Piatti.
Yep.
Still strong.
Yep.
They're probably glad they're not in this book yet,
They're
right?
still
Because
here.
this is the has-beens.
That's right. They're still here. Greeks as well have been exceptionally. They did very well in the restaurant business in Toledo.
Is it a dying breed? How tough is it to have a restaurant these days?
I think it is pretty tough. I mean, I have friends in the business, and they tell me that you have the restaurant first and family second sometimes, because it takes so much time and effort.
Yeah.
And I think the successful ones were family run, and the family spread that around. So really the family was fully engaged in the business.
Yeah, I think of Musa that opened Souk and Sabira recently, and just the connection he's had to so many great operations, and maybe he's the next wave. Maybe he's in the next book.
In the next book, sure.
Decades and decades down the road.
Yeah.
Musa, we don't want to put it out there that you're closing anytime
No.
soon. Not at all. But this is fascinating, Ted. Great. I hope you enjoyed putting it together.
I did. I had a ball.
Yeah. It's good to see, and we also want to point out Mark Snyder and thank you for keeping all those menus over the years.
it's
Where
great
can people
stuff.
get this?
You can find it on Amazon, but locally, if you want to buy local, go to Gathering Volumes in Perrysburg or Titke's in Maumee.
All right, Titke's.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Ted. We'll be back right after this. I feel like I'm on The Price is Right, showing off our Showcase Showdown. Anyway, take a look again. Ted Long's book, along with Mark Snyder, Table for None, Lost Eateries of Toledo. It's a fascinating read, especially for anybody who grew up around this region. Even if you didn't, history is a great thing. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time, back here on Leading Edge.